In the early 2000s, Officer Brian McKinley was patrolling a remote area near the woods in rural Ohio. It was a quiet night, and Brian decided to park his cruiser by the side of the road to fill out some paperwork. Suddenly, he saw a figure dart across the road and into the woods. Assuming it was a trespasser or someone in trouble, Brian radioed his location and went to investigate. As he entered the woods, the trees closed in around him, and the darkness became almost suffocating. He called out, but there was no response. The figure seemed to always be just out of sight, leading him deeper into the forest. After what felt like hours, Brian realized he was lost. His radio was dead and his flashlight flickered weakly. Brian eventually found a small clearing with an old abandoned cabin. He decided to take shelter there until morning. As he approached, he saw the figure standing at the edge of the clearing, watching him. It was a man, but his eyes were hollow and his face was expressionless. Brian tried to speak to him, but the man disappeared into thin air. Terrified, Brian spent the night in the cabin. When dawn broke, he found his way back to the road. His cruiser was gone, and there was no sign of the figure. When he finally made it back to the station, his colleagues told him that no one had heard his radio call and his cruiser was found miles away, undisturbed. Brian never spoke of the incident again, but he requested a transfer to a different precinct. The memory of the vanishing figure haunted him for the rest of his career. In 1995, Deputy Lisa Thompson was working the night shift at a small county jail in Louisiana. The jail was known for its haunted past, with many inmates claiming to hear whispers and see apparitions in the older cells. Lisa was skeptical but intrigued by the stories. One night, Lisa was making her rounds when she heard a faint whispering coming from an empty cell. She shone her flashlight into the cell and saw a figure huddled in the corner. Thinking it was a trespasser, she called for backup and entered the cell. As she approached the figure, it vanished. Confused, Lisa searched the cell but found nothing. Her backup arrived and they both heard the whispering again, this time coming from the adjacent cell. They quickly checked the cell, but it was empty as well. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Lisa stayed in the cell block overnight. As the hours passed, the whispering grew louder, and she felt a cold presence in the room. Suddenly, the cell door slammed shut, trapping her inside. She tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panicking, Lisa radioed for help, but her radio was dead. The whispering turned into low, guttural growls, and she saw shadowy figures moving in the darkness. Just as she felt she couldn't take it anymore, the door creaked open, and the noises stopped. Lisa stumbled out of the cell, shaken and terrified. She never worked the night shift again and avoided the old cell block whenever possible. The jail's haunted reputation only grew, with many believing that the spirits of past inmates still lingered, seeking justice or revenge. In 2010, Officer John Harris of the Los Angeles Police Department was on a routine night patrol when he received a call about a speeding car on a deserted stretch of highway. John quickly responded and spotted the car, an old black sedan driving erratically. He activated his lights and sirens, signaling the car to pull over. Instead, the sedan accelerated, and the chase was on. John followed the car through winding roads and empty streets, but no matter how fast he went, the sedan always stayed just ahead. As they approached a sharp curve, the sedan suddenly swerved off the road and crashed into a ditch. John stopped his cruiser and cautiously approached the wreck. To his surprise, the car was empty. The driver's door was open and there were no signs of anyone inside or around the vehicle. John radioed for backup and they searched the area thoroughly but found no trace of the driver. The sedan was towed to the impound lot, but the mystery didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, John continued to see the same black sedan on his patrols. Each time he tried to stop it, the car would disappear without a trace. Curiosity turned to obsession as John delved into the car's history. He discovered that the sedan had been involved in a fatal accident years earlier, killing the driver instantly. The car had been scrapped, but somehow it kept reappearing on the roads. John's colleagues began to worry about him, noting his increasingly erratic behavior. One night, he disappeared while on patrol, leaving his cruiser parked by the side of the road. The black sedan was never seen again, and John's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. In the late 1980s, Officer Karen Miller, of the Arizona Highway Patrol was driving along a lonely stretch of Route 66. It was a quiet night, and Karen was used to the desolate scenery. Suddenly, she saw a young woman standing by the side of the road, hitchhiking. Karen pulled over and offered the woman a ride. The hitchhiker thanked her and got into the back seat, giving Karen an address a few miles away. As they drove, the woman was quiet, staring out the window with a distant look in her eyes. When they reached the address, Karen turned to tell the woman they had arrived, but the back seat was empty. She was alone in the car. Shocked and confused, Karen got out and knocked on the door of the house. An elderly woman answered, and Karen explained what had happened. The woman's eyes widened with recognition and sorrow. She told Karen that her daughter had died in a car accident on that stretch of road years earlier. Since then, many drivers had reported picking up a hitchhiker matching her description, only for her to disappear before reaching her destination. Karen felt a chill run down her spine as the woman showed her a photograph of her late daughter. It was the same young woman Karen had picked up. Shaken, Karen apologized and left, the experience haunting her for years. She continued her patrols, but every time she drove down that stretch of Route 66, she couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the ghostly hitchhiker sitting in the back seat once more. In 2015, Detective Mike O'Brien of the Chicago Police Department was investigating a series of cold cases involving missing persons. One night, while going through old files in his office, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number that had been disconnected for years. Mike answered, and a woman's voice came through, faint and crackling. "Help me," she pleaded. "I'm trapped." He tried to get more information, but the line went dead. Disturbed, Mike traced the call to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The warehouse had been the last known location of several missing persons, all of whom had vanished without a trace. Determined to find answers, Mike went to the warehouse alone. The building was dark and decrepit, with broken windows and rotting floors. As he searched the rooms, he heard faint whispers and footsteps echoing around him. In the basement, he found an old phone, the same model as the one that had called him. It was covered in dust, but when he picked it up, it rang. He answered, and the same woman's voice begged for help. Mike followed the voice to a hidden room, where he found evidence of a makeshift prison. Chains, old clothing, and personal items from the missing persons littered the floor. The woman's voice grew louder, guiding him to a corner where he found a concealed door. Behind the door was a small, dark chamber. Inside, he found the skeletal remains of several people, all of whom had been reported missing. The woman's voice whispered one last time, "Thank you," before fading away. Mike reported his findings, and the cold cases were finally closed. However, the experience left him deeply scarred. He never forgot the voice that led him to the tragic discovery, and he often wondered if the spirits of the victims had reached out to him for justice. In the early 1990s, Officer Jim Wilson of the New Orleans Police Department was dispatched to investigate a disturbance at an old rundown mansion in the French Quarter. The mansion had a dark history, rumored to be the site of occult rituals and ghostly sightings. Jim arrived at the mansion and found the front door ajar. He entered cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the floorboards creaked under his weight. As he moved deeper into the house, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. In the main hall, he found a circle of candles surrounding a strange symbol drawn in blood. He heard chanting coming from the basement and decided to investigate. As he descended the stairs, the chanting grew louder, echoing off the stone walls. In the basement, Jim found a group of people dressed in dark robes performing a ritual. They turned to face him, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Before he could react, one of the robed figures lunged at him, and everything went black. Jim woke up hours later, lying in the middle of the basement floor. The robed figures were gone, but the candles were still burning. He felt a strange presence within him, as if something had taken hold of his mind. He left the mansion, but the feeling of possession persisted. Over the following weeks, Jim's behavior became increasingly erratic. He experienced blackouts during which he would wake up in strange places with no memory of how he got there. His colleagues noticed the change and grew concerned, but Jim refused to seek help. One night during a routine patrol, Jim disappeared. His cruiser was found parked by the side of the road, but there was no sign of him. A search of his apartment revealed strange symbols drawn on the walls and a journal filled with incoherent ramblings about the mansion and the ritual. Jim was never seen again, and his disappearance remains a mystery. Some believe he fell victim to the dark forces he encountered in the mansion, while others think he was driven mad by the experience. The mansion was eventually condemned and demolished, but its dark legacy lives on in the tales of those who dare to remember.